got a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old, 2 boys that we're going to be looking at, and it's all about opportunity for me. I'm a big believer in you got to give your kids the chance of a bit of reef and beef. Where country kids, I want them to have the Sydney experience or the wherever experience, somewhere that's not here. So that's mine. I'm just looking for opportunity. But I'm from Trengy, 2 boys, and starting the journey now to look for where we want to go.
All right, Kirsten, let's go to you. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, in one word I'd use to describe boarding school is?
Fabulous. I think it is a really great experience. It is very up and down. It's I don't want to pinch your word, but a roller coaster of emotions and finances. Everything involved there is a roller coaster. It's up and down, but it is a fabulous experience from start to finish in so many ways. And I think we'll probably talk about that as we keep going.
Thank you for sharing. And Justine, please.
Yeah, we were talking about it a little bit outside as well. So it is all of those experiences, I suppose. And it can feel like a roller coaster sometimes, but in a good way. Yeah. You sort of, you work really hard to give your children these opportunities, and there are ups and downs and all arounds, but it is a great opportunity and well worth the hard work to get them through.
Thank you for sharing. I'm going to pass the microphone over to Amanda, who is going to ask us some questions.
Thank you, Kaitie. Firstly, welcome everyone that's here. Thank you. And I'll just let you know it is being recorded, so even though we might not have many bums on seats, the room in there is full. I think they're just all busy with the schools, but they are all aware. Hello, Nick and Josie. Hi. Come on down. That you will be able to watch this online. We're going to have a great chat. So I am kicking it off. Thank you, Kaitie. And I'm actually going to interview Kaitie and Lottie. So Kaitie and Lottie are prospective parents. Now, yes, they do all have boys, but we're just speaking generically around the boarding school decision. So thanks, girls. And we'll kick off. One thing I really like to know from parents that are looking and that we talk about as they come through our door is hopes and dreams for your kids. So I'll start with Lottie. What are your biggest hopes for your child as they transition into boarding life? And it's not just about academic, personally, any aspect. What are your hopes and dreams?
I think for any parent, all you want is your child to be the best version of themselves, whether that's academic, sporting, regardless. Even if they're crap at both of those things, like you just want them to find what they love and what they're good at and thrive while they're doing it. And I think the funny thing for us is we've obviously got 2 boys, but they're very, very different boys. One is super academic, one is not, and he's very good at sport. The oldest one isn't. So I think for us, we're looking for that happy medium, that special spot that's going to take care of them both, and make sure that even if they're not the best or they're struggling in one section, the school's going to pick them up and push them forward regardless. And I think that's what our hope is for the boys, just to make sure they're happy and to make sure it's a good experience, because I went to Vinnie's in Sydney and it was the best years of my life. And my hope is that they can turn around one day once they've gotten to the other end and go, God, thank God Mum and Dad gave us that opportunity, and how lucky we are to have been a part of that.
And I think it's something as parents, it gets lost in that search. So you're so focused on whether it's the money and the planning and the logistics around it, you forget the vision, the hopes and dreams and how that may look. And I really think sitting down as a parent, a prospective parent, and really considering that, meeting your child where your child's at, so don't have unrealistic expectations. You're right, the best that they can be. Kaitie, are there any particular skills or qualities that you would hope that boarding school might bring out in your kids? Have you thought about that?
Not really. But I think that, in terms of skills or qualities, I think, like for us, yes, we've got 2 boys. They're very outdoorsy kids. I struggle to bring them back inside. So for us, looking at something that is going to cater to that, but also I think just looking at the kids and treating them as an individual and looking at them and saying, well, what works for you? You know, what you may not be, great at maths, but let's work out a way for you to enjoy learning maths. Let's look at a way for you to really grasp it. And I think that is something really important for us.
It's interesting you should say that. I had a conversation with my husband recently, 3 children, one of whom was not academic or anything, and I said to him, I was just disappointed for him. And he's been out of school for 5 years. I'm still commiserating, but anyway, he's a great kid, but let me just say. Anyway, and I said, I just thought he'd find something that really ignited him and spurred him on and motivated him. And my husband, who often just clarifies things, he looked at me and he went, but look at him. Look at the people he met, the people he surrounded himself with, his network of friends, and he did actually find his passion. It just so happens that it's farming. Anyway, no, it's good, I'm joking. But anyway, it was really interesting. Lottie, tell me, have you got any concerns, or is there anything that's particularly challenging you as you get closer? Like what year's Ted in? 3?
Year 3, yeah.
Yeah. So, you're only a couple of years away. Are there things that are starting, any concerns about that transition to boarding school, or things that you think might be challenging for not only Ted but you and
For sure.
Ned?
There's, first and foremost, which I'm sure everyone can relate to, is how are we going to afford this? I'm sure that's something that everyone thinks about. But above that, for Ted, and not about us, is Ted is at a school in Trangie that has 28 kids through the whole school. In his class, there's 7 students. They're all very varied children. And my greatest concern for Ted is, how the hell is he going to go from this school of 30 kids into a class of 200 kids? And will he have the skills now to adapt to that and not just fall away into the shadows? And I know from speaking to a lot of our friends, that's a concern that a lot of us have, is how will this little country kid adapt in such a big environment, and will he be able to put his best foot forward when he's faced with a class that big? But that's definitely something that concerns us. But above that, financially, that's for sure a huge concern for us. Where my husband's a farmer, I'm an artist, our incomes are never the same year to year, and it's sort of going, we want our child or our children to have the best opportunity they can, but are we committing to something we can see through? And that's definitely a discussion that we're having very often.
Very valid, Lottie. Thinking about those challenges or concerns, and Kaitie, I don't know if you've had a chance to think, but if there are certain things like whether it's the fitting in or transitioning from small numbers to larger numbers, have you put any thought into what you would hope schools can do to support that in the transitioning of your children?
Yeah, I just hope that the communication is open between us parents and the school. I'd like to think that, if I want to come and see my kids, I can. If I want, to talk to them or anything, like I want to know that, okay, if my kid's not coping, why are they not coping? And what can I do from a distance, but also what can the school do to help them in that moment until maybe I get there? Or, that's kind of, I guess, one main concern,
I think it's worth saying too, though, that the challenges that we face that I just spoke about, they're not groundbreaking. Every parent before me has faced those same challenges. And I think it's about the parents mentally preparing for the idea that you're not the first person, your child is not the first person to go to boarding school. Definitely. Everyone's done it. And I think we owe it to our kids to not overextend that fear and to not project that onto our kids, and to surround yourself with parents. Like, I'm an exporter. I know exactly what's going to happen. But I think we overcomplicate it because it's easier to panic than it is to be excited. And we're actively trying at the moment to be like, this is a good thing. This is not something to be scared of. This is something that's going to be really great for our kids in our community and all those things. So I think it's important to remember that you're not that important. Like, you're not the first person. It's your child and you'll protect them, but everyone's here is doing it or has done it, and it's worked out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there are elements of, sometimes you'll hear parents and they are projecting that fear onto their children, or worse still, like me, not having the conversation at all. So, because I was probably in denial until it was too late to be in denial.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 4 weeks from school.
You've done all of that conversation with your children, because we were always in remote areas with very small schools, so you were quite good at the discussion with the kids growing up that this would happen come high school, but wasn't so good with myself in that reality. When it
Terrible. I
happened.
think you and I might have been the same. I remember Ross saying to me, getting sidetracked, sorry, he said, "This is going to be really hard, Amanda, like really hard." I'm like, yeah. Anyway, and blase, curled up on the back seat of the car driving home, like, so bad, the emotions, yeah. Anyway, sidetrack. What do you think about your child's future, Kaitie? Like, have you thought about what boarding school how it might shape them as a future adult?
So yesterday I was actually walking around the stalls, and I was chatting to a few of the schools, and one of the gentlemen actually said to me, you know, when you put your child through boarding school, you're actually, you're not buying them school, you're buying them a network. And I thought that has, like, obviously it was only yesterday, but I was like, that's a great way of describing it, because you're giving them this network of people that they may not have ever met, regardless of where they go to school. They're going to have friends everywhere. They're going to have these people, these families that they bond with and become a part of your family. And I think that for us, I was like, I want to give my kids that. Like, that is a great thing for them to have. And in terms of their future, I'm like, that's a great opportunity to give to them. So yeah.
And Lottie, what are you thinking? Like, when you think about the young adults that your boys become, what part do you think boarding school could play in that? Are there other things you've thought of?
For sure. I think anyone that's from a small town knows the way that kids can go, the directions that are sometimes there that we don't want our children to go down. And for me, it's that exposure therapy of being like, this is what's out there, boys. It's not just, you can come back and be a farmer, no shade. We love farming, like, we're farmers. You can do that if you want, but you don't have to. There's all these other incredible things that you could be.
And being exposed to how many things are available and how many people do different things.
Yeah, for sure. And
allowing your kids to see that big, broad world.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing that always stuck with me, and it was kind of the reality check after I finished school of what school had actually taught me. And it's so silly and small, but we went back to Sydney about 6 weeks after we'd finished school, and a lot of my friends from home, being Narromine, where we grew up, came with us. And we got to the train station and none of them knew how to catch a train. No one knew. They were looking at these screens and they were going, how could we possibly get from Central to Town Hall? I just can't fathom it. And they're looking around and they're going, someone needs to help us. And I sat there going, shit, like, if I hadn't have had this experience, it's something so small like that, but in the big grand scheme of things, that's also the reason why in my profession now I've got connections to people in Sydney. And I've got all these things, and if we hadn't had that, you just don't know it's there. It's
you don't
life
even
skills.
know it's there.
Yeah, it's so many
That's
life
right.
skills that aren't, nothing bad will happen if you don't know them, but it's nothing
Even
bad
that
can happen.
transition to vocational learning, whether that's, TAFE or university, it's not such a daunting prospect. If your child's gone to boarding school, even in the country, but they've lived it out of home, that's not as hard a transition to then go off to college or uni or TAFE. All of those things, they're used to sort of being responsible for their own gear, time, a bit of independence. Yeah. Now I'm going to pass over to Kaitie. We've done the perspective. We're going to talk to current parents and past parents now for some real eye-opening insights into the whole process. So thanks. And I'm actually going to leave the stage.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, thank you, Amanda. So Justine, I wanted to ask about costs, so financially. What were some of the biggest financial surprises or hidden costs that you encountered when your children started boarding school, and how did you plan for them?
I think you understood the fees, and I think some of those on costs that you weren't expecting was, you know, how much you wanted to be going to Sydney and seeing them. And so those trips to Sydney were expensive, you know, accommodation. You want to take all their mates out for lunch and do all those things as well. And so if you did that a couple of times a term over the course of the year, that is a big chunk of money on top. And then there were, I mean, my eldest daughter started away in 2002, so, you know, we're going back 23 years. But it was the discussion with the schools at that time was making sure you were getting clarity around what all these other costs were going to be, and whether that was equipment or whether it was, I mean, sometimes for a first-time parent, the shock of having to actually get the full uniform package is enormous. So again, it's probably the school fees are set. You know that's what's happening. That's what you're working for. But a lot of those other on costs around music or excursions or trips, that you want all those opportunities to happen. But yeah, some of those for me in those, or for us in those early days, was all those extra trips down to visit or go to a grand final or whatever that might be.
So if you had your time again, what question would you ask now in terms of those costs? Like, what would be a question that you would ask the schools about? Is it something that they can offer? Like, is it something that they can say, yes, here's a list of all of the things that you may need to pay for? Or
I think it's asking those questions up front, I suppose, and I'm sure it's a lot more clarified, I hope, these days. Not that it wasn't, but that those were the sort of surprises as a first-time parent going. And sort of we had this approach that we thought the kids will grow up in the country, so we looked at Sydney as they're now kids having that city experience and country experience during their schooling. What you don't realise also then is, like, it is a long way to go, and it is expensive, and, you know, there are so many, it feels like there are so many options of very good schools, country and city, and, you know, non-fee paying schools. Now it feels the selection or the information that's out there is a lot greater, I think, than there was no, you know, no internet and all that sort of stuff, really. Yeah.
thank you. And Kirsten, sorry, I just have to flick the page there. What types of financial support were you able to access, like bursaries, scholarships or government assistance, and how did you find out about them?
I think the schools that you are looking at, you've generally got a narrow list by the end of coming to these sorts of things. You have a list, and you can, I think the best thing to do is communicate with the school, because there are so many bursaries and there are so many scholarships, and not all schools offer the same thing. So our boys, the eldest one was fortunate enough to get a Smith family scholarship, so that meant he was part of the Indigenous program at Joey's, and he then could access AB study because of that. And that was something I learnt along the way. But not all schools offer, or the Smith family doesn't provide that to all schools. So it was about talking to the school, and they could say, you could try this angle, or you could try whatever angle at that school. So all of them are different. But the thing that really you have to do is talk to them and say, what can we do? We really love your school. but we are really going to struggle. How can we do this? Yeah. And some schools do, big fundraisers for bush kids or Boys from the Bush bursaries or whatever that means at the next school. So I think it is just about communicating it. Yeah. I think the hidden cost thing, we probably all know what the fees are because that's one of the first things we're going to ask. Like you said, we're all anxious about that. I think it is hard to forecast though. We can all say, righto, this is exactly what we've got to pay each year for the next 6 years or 4 years or whatever that is. But we don't know what the season's going to look like in 3 years. We don't know whether there's a big old drought coming back or, what's ahead. And so those hidden costs, they're not really hidden costs, but they're hidden forecasts that we don't really know about. And that can make it really challenging along the way, I think. And the only thing, again, is back to the communication. You just have to talk a lot and tell them and ask the questions. What happens if? What are we going to do? That's how are we going to fix this? How are we going to make it better?
Please, Justine.
I'll just add as well, I know in my era, it was the ICPA as well. You were members of the ICPA. They were lobbying hard with the government for assistance for isolated children. And you'd get the Petals magazine and the Top Wire would come snail mail.
Yeah.
But there was always a lot of information in there about different schools and different scholarships and different opportunities for bush kids as well. I cannot, the value of the ICPA across all of regional kids in Australia just cannot be ever underestimated. It's phenomenal. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing. So looking back, what helped you make boarding school financially sustainable, and what advice would you give to families who are feeling the pressure? So if there's any, if you could tell Lottie and myself something right now that we could go and either ask or something that we could think about.
The boys, I've got one daughter and 3 sons, and the boys' school has accommodation for country parents that's very affordable. It's communal living, but that's okay. You can go down there and stay any time. It's called the Country Club, and that's been a really great thing. That sometimes, if you have been down 2 or 3 times in a term because they're homesick or they've had lots on, and you are sort of starting to feel a pinch in that way, some schools, not all of them, but some schools have parents' accommodation, and if that's something you need to look at, by all means have a look at that and ask the questions, do you have that for parents? Yeah. Also, I think there's other schools that also do city-country family connections, and so sometimes the whole family can stay with the city family, or sometimes it's just the kids that have got that support with a city family. So there's different schools do different things, but I think it's important to find out those things. Yeah.
No, that's really cool. Thank you. So just to change the pace, boarding schools often credited with building independence. Has that been your experience? Have you noticed changes in your children since starting with confidence or time management, maturity, all of those things?
Yeah, I have. Interestingly, when you were talking about your boys being outdoorsy kids and farm kids, I think so many of us have those. Obviously, this is where we all are in rural Australia. Yes. I think sometimes it's the other way around. It's that our kids are really independent kids. They're driving farm vehicles around, they are driving trucks, or they're go and get on a horse, or they're doing such big hours. They decide when they want to eat, they decide what they're doing. They're very independent. So it's actually the reverse when they go to school, in that you're handing in your phone. You can only eat at 5 o'clock. You can,
a bit more regimented.
Yeah, and I think as they get older, I've got a boy that's 17, and so he is really mature and he's really independent. So when he goes back to school, it's the brakes are put on. And so he struggles the other way around.
Wow.
No, you're not having a beer at the shed with the boys.
Yes.
You are, they have to, but that can also be a good thing. That's reality and that's life, that breaks are put on at some point. That you have
Absolutely.
to do things in jobs or in situations where you've got to stop and think and do it a different way.
100%.
So independence, yes, but the reverse probably.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Justine, so did your children come out of the experience differently than you expected from boarding?
I don't know if it was different to what I expected, but I was very, very happy with, well, they were happy. You know, they'd had great opportunity, great experiences, great mates, had, you know, friendships had been formed, they'd had great adventures, and it was, you know, they'd had that sort of exposure to looking at city life and, you know, lots of day bug mates, so you're getting that city experience going out to visit friends, families, that type of thing. So I think overall, I don't think there was an expected sort of outcome.
Yes.
But it was a very good outcome, and I think the three girls would all agree with that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, Lottie, you said earlier, which was a really good thing, be the best version of themselves.
For sure.
That would be...
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the goal.
We just-
Otherwise,
yeah.
we wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
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 Be the best Percy Wiggins you can be the
Yeah.
Or
And I did
whichever
have
child.
a question for you, Lottie. I wanted to ask, like, how important is that kind of personal development to you when it comes to thinking about, like, these schools?
Oh, well, that's essentially what we're paying for, right? Like, you can get
Yeah.
a free education anywhere in the world, well, anywhere in Australia, I should say. But what we're paying for is that connection and that opportunity to go out and see the bigger things. And that's exactly what we're looking for when we're looking at these schools.
Yes.
You know, the kids will be all right. They'll figure out how to read and write and do all those things, but will they turn into strong, independent, kind people?
Yes.
And that's what I want these schools to teach them. I want them to be loved and cared for away from home and parented in the same way that we would parent, and hope that when they come out the end, they're better than what we could have done anyway.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're genuinely looking for.
Yep, absolutely. And speaking of connection, so community is such a huge part of the boarding school experience. Kirsten, what has community meant to your family among the parents, staff and students?
I think at the beginning I probably underestimated it. I have a fairly tight family. We're all very close. The 4 kids are very close, and I probably didn't see the value in school community until I got there, and the realisation of how much support you get from the whole community. You know, the city parents, the other country parents, the kids that are in the Northern Territory that go to school with them. Like, there's such a community there that they can build, and we can build with them.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And then they have tools and people around them. You can say, remember you met that little guy that helped out in that way, or remember that teacher's really good at helping you with that, planning your day, or whatever it happens to be. There's such a big level of community in so many different ways,
Wow.
that I didn't probably realise.
Oh, wow. And Justine, did your children, did they find their people easily? Like, how important was that for the overall experience?
Say that again, sorry.
Did your children, did they find their people easily when they transitioned into boarding?
Yeah, well, I think that was part of their excitement as well. They were from a very small school. My eldest daughter had been the only child in her class for a few years, quite a few years. So whilst you were a bit sort of nervous about the big change of going into a big school that has a boarding house and the day kids, they all totally did. It was fantastic because there are so many people there. So, do you know what I mean? You find your people, and you find
find your tribe.
You find your close buddies, and then you have all these amazing acquaintances as well that you keep forever. So, yeah, no, definitely, that was a big change and a big positive from the boarding house.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, that's awesome. I want to do a bit of a lightning round. So, Lottie, I'm going to start with you. What is a myth about boarding school that you would like to bust?
Ooh. I don't know.
Is there something that you think that, like, is, you know, you hear often and you think, no, that's not true. Like, that's from your experience.
I don't know. My experience at boarding school was really great. Like,
Yes.
if I could go back, I would. It was some of the best years of my life. We had a really, really good time. Maybe a bit too much of a good time. Maybe that's why I enjoyed it so much. But I guess the myth, I suppose, is that you lose connection with home. And for us, we really didn't. When we would come back in the holidays, we still had our mates that we went to school with in primary school, and we were still part of the same sporting clubs and doing all those things. And I think there's definitely a little bit of that sense of, if we send them away, will they want to come back? And in my experience, everyone came back.
Yeah.
So we just went away and we learned all these new and incredible things, and then we brought them back and we implemented them in our communities that we're still in today.
Yeah.
So I think, you don't lose touch of home.
Yeah.
At
I
all.
love that. Thank you. Justine, do you have a myth about boarding?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's that adjustment, I suppose. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
You sort of worry you're creating this opportunity, but there's an adjustment. But the village, the community is phenomenal. Like as Kirsty said, but like even the suburb in Sydney where the kids were engaged with the village of the school as well.
Yeah.
So
Oh, wow, yeah.
I think
Just's kids and I went to Vinnie's in Potts Point.
my youngest and
Yes.
Lottie were at school together.
And all of the community there, which was very vast
Yes.
in King's Cross, they loved us.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
taught us so, like, acceptance as well, being a really big one that we would not have maybe seen out here so
Yes.
much with the community.
Yeah, yeah.
And we learnt all our best skills in the cross, which is a weird thing to say, but it
But
really
volunteering
did.
and
Volunteering,
Matt
we,
Talbot
we fed
like the
feeding with
diversity of
homeless and,
experience.
it was beautiful.
That's
And
awesome.
they're really fond memories, actually. Like, they're some of the better ones outside of school, like from the classroom at least. We did so much social work, and it was really incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it is probably that there is still that little community
Yes.
or country experience, even though you're in the
I
great
love
big
that.
city.
That's-
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a myth?
I think I'll just a little bit of a twist on yours lot, that parents often say once you send them, then they're gone, and they're not part of their home community anymore, and that they might go. And I think that only happens if we create that.
Yeah,
If we
okay.
make that happen.
Okay.
I think if we are the type of family, which we are,
Yes.
when they come home in the holidays, you can still play for the Narromine Jets
Yeah.
in the school holidays. You can still have your schoolmates over, and our kids used to do a gatho each holidays with their primary school mates. So it's us as parents that can bust the
Create
myths.
that. Yes.
The myth can be there if you let it.
Yes.
And I've got 2 that have left and 2 that are still at school. And so my eldest 2 were actually camp drafting at Galargambone this weekend. And so they're still part of that community. They're home just for a week and they're camp drafting this weekend. And so we have created that.
Yeah.
And I think we can bust the myths.
Yeah. And that's really important. I love that.
Yeah. That's
How good. Just to go back a little bit, but speaking of adjustment, Kirsten, can you walk us through the first few weeks? How did your children settle in, and how did you manage the adjustment as a parent?
just straight up there. I have 4 kids that have had a really, really homesick time.
Yep.
And even right through to the end of Year 12.
Right.
They've all been incredibly homesick, which has been really tough. So the adjustment, I think the first few weeks, that's not really the homesick time. The homesick time is when you're really in the thick of it.
Yeah.
When they're really tired and they're worn down and it's cold and it's the middle of the year and they just want to come home. And that first 6 weeks, it's still buzz, buzz, buzz. And, oh, I met this cool guy that does this cool thing, or, you know, I met this girl from wherever. There's all those fun things at the beginning. It's when it really settles in that that we had to learn how to get on and how to get on with it. Yeah.
And what would be something, I guess, like you've learned that, and what was one of the I suppose tools, or is there some advice that you can give?
I was telling you girls before, I have a friend that lives in Narromine, and she said once, they holler, I follow. And so I think years or generations ago, it was that they dropped at the beginning of the term or the beginning of the year and you didn't see them again. Right. I think these days we don't have that so much. You can go down and see them, or go to, you know, if you're in Orange or Bathurst or wherever they're at school, they're your kids. You go and see them whenever you like, and if you think that they need that support, well, then go and do it. I think that there's no rules anymore about how long you should leave things or how you should do things. Do what you feel as a mum or a dad. Yeah,
they are. I like that. They are still your children.
Yep.
Yes,
You're not
they may
handing
be in
them
the
over.
care of someone else, but they are
they're
still your
yours.
children.
Yeah.
Justine, was there anything that you wish you'd known going into that first term?
I think the first two daughters were quite homesick. The eldest one was very homesick and very early, interestingly.
In that first 6 weeks.
So and in those days you were almost encouraged to sort of leave them and let them settle in and get used to it. So I wouldn't advise that, actually.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I waited 6 weeks with her before we went down to have a visit, and I should have done it at week 2.
Right.
But, you know, that's all hindsight sort of information. But, you know, by the time the youngest one was going, the other two were already in the boarding house as well, and she was like, you know, the year before she was meant to go to school, she's like, you know, I really love your mum, but I'd really like to go down to school with the girls.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
ready.
that helped, having her sisters and having that understanding of what the boarding house was like. You know, the younger kids had been there all the time because the oldest one was there first. So there was some of that made it a lot easier. But definitely with the first one, it wasn't quite you drop them off and pick them up after term 1 at all at that time. But I did feel that you were encouraged to sort of, you know, let them settle in. But again, it's just all that communication is so different, I think, now too. It's like knowing, having those relationships really quickly, and you know what's going on.
I think
a lot more mobile
it's also
phones, you know.
We do communicate differently and more with our kids now too. So they can say, when will you come down?
Yeah.
In 2 weeks. So then they go, right, okay, 13 days ago, 12 days ago, or if they're homesick, that. Rather than saying, when you settle in, I'll come down and see you.
Yeah.
it's not like that now, like you said,
Which is good.
Which is
That's a good thing.
We've learned.
So that's probably my big hindsight sort of comment around the eldest one starting.
Okay.
Because it was a big change.
Yeah, absolutely.
For her.
And Lottie, hearing this, do you is there something that makes you more nervous or curious about those early days?
I think it's very comforting to hear you guys say, you know, they're your kids, you know, because I think it's so constitutionalised from the outside that you go, it's regimented, these are the rules.
And that you're handing over your kids.
You gave them to us, so we're in charge now, and you just sit back and we'll do the work. And that's, I think, really terrifying to hand your kids over to someone else. And it's so nice to hear that you can ring them and go, no, I want to come and get them this weekend. I am. And if we have the power to do that, and if, you know, there's certain schools out there that are going, yes, come and do that, we encourage it, that would be a big draw card for me, for sure. Yeah. Because you don't want to lose that connection or the control over your kids because you love them. Yeah. And you care about them. So, I think that's really comforting to hear, actually.
This is a question for all of you, but tell me, what's the best thing about boarding school for that in your experience? What's the
My
best
friends,
thing?
the friends I made, they're still my friends today.
Yep.
And I can't imagine the trajectory of my life if I hadn't have met them all.
As a parent, I would say the same about, as in knowing my kids' friends is so great and so fun.
Yeah.
Having them, you know, all of them at our house or that part equally is,
Yep.
they're not really my friends, but I feel like they're my friends.
They're an extension of your
they're
family.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a really great thing. Yeah.
That's so lovely. All right. So to wrap up, what is one piece of advice you'd give to a parent considering boarding school right now, if you could give one piece?
I think I would say, you know, there are lots of people out there that are doing it for the first time, and it's like step into it and create relationships quickly with the school, with the teachers, with the day, like if there's day kids with school teachers as well, like sometimes you'd remind them that they're boarders, they're not day bugs. And then that broader village, because, I mean, it's pretty amazing for the children, but like the great friends that we make out of it as parents through that process as well. But it's really around don't not step into it and speak up and introduce yourself and back yourself and back your kids. Do you know what I mean? It's that we are placing our children in someone else's care. So yeah, never not keep participating in that, I suppose. Yeah.
Very good. Anything to add, Lottie?
I have no advice because I'm not there yet.
I think that's the best advice, yeah. Our eldest boy, he had a COVID experience. So we dropped and we did a couple of the new things, you know, year dinners and that sort of stuff, and then pretty much we didn't see the school again for 5 years. I know COVID didn't go for 5 years, but there was lots of boundaries in place there. You couldn't go to sport, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. So I really struggled with that, immersing ourselves in it because we didn't have, we weren't able to.
Allowed to.
Yeah, and then the next boy that came was during COVID restrictions, not lockdowns, but we weren't allowed in the boarding house to help him unpack because of, and so I really struggled with that one because that's, for a mum, that's
the handover.
That's the handover, and so, but yes, make sure that you can do those things that we don't live in a COVID time. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Good luck with it, girls.
Thank
The
you.
boarding school thing.
Thank you. This has been so great for me. I have learned so much, and I feel like I've, you know, it's given me a whole list of new questions, you know, and things to consider and think about, and I'm so grateful for that. So thank you. And I do just want to say thank you so much, Lottie, Kirsten and Justine, for sharing your experience with such honesty. And thank you to everyone for joining us. I hope that today has given you a more grounded, real-world view into boarding life. And I think, we'll finish there. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.
Groovy.